Chapter 3 Charleston Part 2 What kind of a person didn't go to their brother's show? Especially a person that was literally on the tour with them. James knew better than to think that the Black brothers were simple. They argued so passive-aggressively sometimes that as an outsider looking in, it just appeared as though they were having a normal conversation. "No, Pete, I'm tired tonight, is all," he lied. If anything, they would understand what it meant to be tired. When they were still in school, the only gigs they could get sometimes were once on random Thursday at almost midnight, and that was after a full day of school, and Remus trying to get them to do their homework. "Stars don't need homework, Mooney," Sirius had told him over and over. Even at 16, Sirius Black knew that this was the life he was destined for. Nobody dared try to contradict him. They knew it was true too. Sirius and Peter, with their arms thrown over each other's back, started walking towards a nearby bar, kicking their legs up high and singing a song that they hadn't actually finished writing yet, being as loud and obnoxious as possibly could be. "So, what's the truth?" Remus asked him, waiting back for an extra beat. James pressed his lips together. If he couldn't lie, he could just say nothing. "Prongs?" James sighed, losing his guard. He could tell Remus anything, because he actually knew how to keep it a secret. To talk to Regulus. He didn't look surprised in the slightest, like maybe that was exactly what he had been expecting. "What about?" "You'll find out when I'm successful," James said confidently, starting to walk backwards in the opposite direction. The bus was parked around back, and hopefully that was where Regulus would still be waiting. Remus smiled. "Sounds like a bit wishful thinking, no?" Before James could answer, Sirius was yelling for Remus to join them, standing impatiently about 15 yards away with Peter. "Lupin! Now or never, darling." Remus rolled his eyes, but there was a tiny blush on his cheeks. "Take care of him tonight," James asked, even though he didn't need to. When Sirius was sad or disappointed, he tended to go way overboard during a night out. Remus took care of all of them, even if he pretended he hated it when they called him Mom. They knew he loved them. James pretended that he waited until he lost sight of his friends because he wanted to be sure that they were able to get where they were going. But in truth, he was a bit scared. There was something about talking to Regulus that made James a bit stupid. He had noticed it that very first night when his music had been too loud. He turned on his heel and walked around the back of the venue. Albeit he walked slowly, but progress is progress either way. After 5 hours, Regulus decided he absolutely hated to ring. He could not get comfortable on the couch, particularly with the inability to lay on his side because of his wrist. The ride was not smooth. It was hot, there was no space, it was very loud, and it smelled like exhaust. Really, he did try not to be miserable, but it was hard to find any good in a bus with 4 other guys. He heard when his brother and the tall one woke up. They talked loud and didn't have any problem with waking him up again because of it. So, he couldn't help but be grumpy. Plus, optimism had never been his strong suit. He hated it even more when, after barely any on and off again sleep, Peter came to wake him up officially, saying that there was breakfast and coffee. And he was going to have to eat it even if he wasn't hungry, because Sirius was now watching his food habits like a hawk. Another thing Regulus hated? James Potter without a shit. What the fuck was he doing? Regulus could only see his back first, but he could tell that James was fit, and he couldn't look away not for a long time. He looked sinful. Regulus pretended he hated it, for his own sake. He refused to look at James and grabbed the coffee, saying a general thank you since he didn't know who had gone to pick it up. It was crowded up there, though, and getting increasingly hard to breathe, so he made his way to the back of the bus again and shut the door. It wasn't any easier to breathe. His mind was already starting to create a very long to do list, and there was a reason Regulus had yet to even plug in his phone. Unfortunately, he couldn't just disappear from the world, even if he had been kidnapped. God, he still could not fucking believe that his own brother literally stole him out of his hotel. It was insane. He was clinically insane. Regulus still had responsibilities. When Peter asked if he could hand back there with him, Regulus just saw it as another excuse to wait on all of that, and he said yes. He found Peter to be a little bit odd, if he was honest. His demeanor was overall kind, although it was clear that he didn't take much bullshit. He was funny, but in an unassuming way. He made people laugh without trying to be funny, and most of the time didn't know what they were laughing about. He also liked to talk. A lot. Every single thought that popped into his head, he just shared it with Regulus. He didn't seem to be affected when Regulus didn't answer or said something rude or sarcastic. He still just kept talking. It was easy for him to understand how Peter and Sirius were friends right then. They probably just talked at each other for hours and never got bored. Are you even listening to me? Regulus didn't look up from the book he was reading. He had no idea who it belonged to, just that he saw it sitting out and was bored enough to give it a try. So he obviously was not actively listening to Peter. He knew he was saying something. He just didn't know what it was. No. Peter threw his hands up in frustration. I was telling you something important. Doubtful. Peter grabbed the book out of his hand, and Regulus slowly brought his eyes up to see Peter staring at him. He noticed his blue eyes first, and they almost scared him a little with how purely blue they were. And then the light dusting of freckles, that was probably from hours spent in the sun that summer, made Regulus realize he had never actually looked at Peter. Are we gonna make out right now? Regulus fought a smile as he looked away. You're not my type, he said. And don't lose my page. Peter kept his finger in between the pages that Regulus was reading, but of course now he was intrigued. Because I'm a man? Because you're blonde. Peter started laughing, a loud sound that came bubbling out of him with no warning. It was so pure almost. He didn't know how to describe it, just that it was real, and it was obnoxious, and it made Regulus smile despite himself. Can I have the book back? No, Peter said, dropping all the humor on his face to speak flatly. No? I told you I was telling you something important. So tell me then. We have to go to soundcheck. Oh. Is that all? Regulus asked. Peter smiled at him, handing Regulus his book back, still open to his page, thankfully, as he started to stand up. Want to come? He was bored out of his mind and starting to get incredibly claustrophobic, but he still said no. He didn't want to intrude on more space that wasn't his. He already felt so uncomfortable in a bus full of stuff that didn't belong to him. And Regulus knew he didn't belong at a concert, let alone a sound check. It was another part of the reason he couldn't sleep. It wasn't that he didn't feel welcome, although he didn't really feel that way either. It wasn't any of their faults, in fact, that they had gone out of their ways thus far. to treat him like he was supposed to be there. But Regulus knew when he wasn't wanted. So he would eat a muffin for breakfast in front of Sirius. He would take care of his body and his wrist, and he would be back home within the week. But still, it wasn't so much that he didn't feel welcome. It was that he didn't feel like he belonged there. He wasn't like Sirius or his bandmates. He wasn't loud or spontaneous or any good at singing. He didn't do drugs, he hadn't smoked weed in years, he drank only occasionally and never during performance season. He just didn't fit in there. After they all left for soundcheck, Regulus decided to go on a walk. He found out they were in Charleston, although he didn't know what that meant outside of the fact that it was a city in Carolina. Peter had mumbled something about a north and a south, but he hadn't been listening very well. He brought his phone with him, and it was charged now. He was just absolutely dreading the moment that he was going to turn it on. He imagined there were going to be calls and texts from Pandora, asking if he was okay. There were going to be hundreds of voicemails from Dorca as well, which he would delete before listening to, he was sure. She would be saying the same thing in all of them anyway, asking him if he was okay, what happened, call her back, etc., etc. And he would have an email from his company probably firing him or inviting him to their office to fire him in person. That was a sure thing that he did not want to think about yet. During a performance last year, one of the girls stumbled out of a turn and she was fired within the hour. It was terrible and cruel, but it was ballet. First, he texted Pandora back. He thought about never answering her, but he didn't want to lose the few friends he did have, and she was always kind to him, even when he was being an asshole. He let her know he was fine and that he just fainted, sugarcoating it as much as possible and breezing right past the injury. His finger hovered over the call button as he tried to calculate what time it was in London. He knew he needed to call Dorca. She was probably worrying about him, and she was just as much his friend as Pandora was. Except she was much scarier, and he knew he was going to be lectured for not answering his phone for 24 hours. He pressed call before he could think better of it, and brought the phone up to his ear, kicking rocks on the sidewalk as he went. He thought that America was a bit odd. They did everything backwards. Regulus Black. What the actual fuck? He grimaced slightly, stopping at a bench and taking a seat. Hey, Cass, he said, trying to keep his tone as light and airy as possible. You are literally the worst. I know. I got a phone call at like 2 in the fucking morning telling me you passed out on a stage. Yeah, that's true, he mumbled, like maybe if he talked quietly enough, she wouldn't hear him. An old couple walked by him and they both gave him big smiles. Regulus couldn't even attempt to return it. His stomach was entirely unsettled when Dorca took a long time to answer him. Are you firing me? He asked, hoping to relieve the tension. You fucking idiot. I didn't mean to pass out, he defended. What? No, God, fucking idiot, proving it yet again. Wow, really feeling the love. Are you okay? Yes, he said automatically. He didn't stop to think about it. He hadn't really. His entire life was just sort of changed, and his feelings about the whole thing were still very conflicted. Regulus, I don't want to talk about that. Okay. She paused for another bit. So, where are you then? Back in town? He had to tell her, he knew that. He just didn't want to explain how he let himself be kidnapped by 4 of the most annoying people he knew. Really, he should have put up much more of a fight, but and he would never admit this out loud. It was nice to be cared for. I'm on a tour, he said. Tour? I broke my wrist when I passed out, he said, deciding to not answer any of her questions until the end. My brother forced me to go on tour with him for a week so that he can clear his conscience. Your brother Sirius Black? Yes. The Marauders? Regulus paused. Was Dorka fun and he just simply hadn't known this entire time? Are you about to ask me for concert tickets? Wait, did you say you broke your wrist? Regulus explained what happened in his own sugar-coated, not all that bad, except it's actually very dramatic and I'm dying sort of way. It was a lot better to talk about it than he thought it would be, especially because Doc at least understood in a way his brother and his friends never could. They talked for a long time, long enough that Regulus got up to start walking again, so that he didn't really know where he was anymore. Very purposefully, Dorka was not saying anything about the state of Regulus's job. He knew he was brilliant at ballet. It was his entire life. He was one of the most, if not the most, well-known name at the moment. By now, though, his reputation was completely tanked. He messed up at professional ballet. There was simply no coming back from that. There were people that had just been waiting for him to tank, for him to mess up and do something wrong. He was sure there were people who enjoyed it as well. They enjoyed that the man who could simply do no wrong had fallen, literally. Cass? Reg, just say it. She waited a bit. They don't want you back. It was exactly what he had been expecting to hear. So he didn't understand why it felt like she had just reached it and ripped his heart out. He had only ever done ballet to make his parents happy, had succeeded in it to make them proud, and that had never even worked. It was his whole life, and now he was nobody. He had to use GPS to find his way back to the tour bus, and he almost didn't make it when his phone was about to die on him just before he got back. It was empty. Not even the driver was there, and Regulus realized they were probably on stage. He had completely forgotten that they had a show that night. He was supposed to go. He wasn't sure if Sirius would even want him there. And he was exhausted. He really had gotten no sleep the night prior, and he was planning on using the fact that the bus was empty to actually sleep. He left the door to the back of the bus open, trying to make himself feel less caged in. Regulus had no idea how Sirius was planning on doing this for months. When they were younger, they had to spend hours locked inside tiny cupboards or closets. The parents would just put them in there if they acted out or threw a tantrum, and sometimes forget that they were in there. They used to have to sneak each other food if it went well past dinner time. Regulus has hated tiny spaces ever since then. He opened the window as well, not caring that the air was sticky and humid because it was helping him breathe. Regulus must have only been asleep for an hour or two, or even that hardly counted since he slept floating in and out of consciousness, when he heard somebody get on the bus. A small part of him thought that maybe someone was coming to murder him, and he welcomed it, until he saw the figure of James Potter walking towards him. Regulus froze. He couldn't help it. James was wearing bell-bottom jeans and a t-shirt that was tied around his arms. His hair was damp and sweaty, and his face was glowing from it. There was no doubt in his mind that he'd just finished playing the show, and his breathing was still a little uneven, like maybe he had been working out. Another thing he noticed: James was angry about something. He stood in the doorway of the back room, his arms crossed and his gaze narrowed. It was enough that it made Regulus sit up, mostly in confusion. Have you just been here the whole time? James asked him. Regulus blinked, wondering why James would even care where he had been. They weren't exactly friends. In fact, they had only spoken to each other maybe a grand total of 10 minutes since they met. Not the whole time, no. You didn't come to the show. I wasn't invited. Bullshit. Rigel sighed. He wasn't exactly in the mood for this conversation. He wasn't in the mood for anything, and that was exactly what he told James. Go away, Potter. It's my tour bus. Rigel clenched his jaw, because yeah, it was his tour bus. Regis was all too aware of the fact, and it wasn't making staying there any easier. Are you going to say something? What do you want me to say? I'm here against my will, and my arm is a hindrance in my daily life. I can't sleep for more than 20 minutes at a time. I lost my job, my only friends are overseas, and I have to fucking deal with you for the next week. So, really, James, what do you want me to say? James opened and closed his mouth, and Regulus immediately regretted every single word he had just said because, oh fuck, why did he do that? He didn't want to open any sort of lines of communication with James, and Regulus could just tell that he was the kind of person who actually talked about their feelings. So, in his usual style, Regulus avoided that at all costs and left the bus as quickly as he could. James followed him,